Hello again, everybody, and hello to Nipawa joining us this morning. We were just bragging about you, actually, how full you are. Also should mention that in Nipawa, it's kind of funny, every single person serves, which is amazing. They are all involved in the running of that church. And even if before they have planned to protect, because you need to be about 6 months in before you're through the protocol, they're still stacking chairs. So if you're like before the 6 month, you're still doing something. So yeah, we're just proud of you guys for everything that you're growing into there. Let's start with a couple scenarios. One is your kid has a bike, and they come inside and they're like, "My bike's broken." They're like, what happened? And they're really sad because it's a brand new bike. And they're like, "Well, me and my friend, we went up on the shed, and we wanted to see who could throw our bikes the farthest. Can you fix my bike?" What's your sympathy level? What's your wanting to help level? It's not super high. Why? Because it's their fault, right? It's your own fault. You fix it. Now, kid comes in, has their bike out there crying, new bike. "My bike's broken. Oh, what happened?" "Oh, the bully took it, put it behind his truck and backed over it a few times." It's a high-end bully in the neighborhood. This is a significant bully. Really picking on those 6-year-olds. And can you fix my bike? What's your sympathy level? It's a lot higher, I would think, unless something's maybe broken inside of you. you would be more inclined to help the victim than the one who it's their own fault, right? As a general rule. Okay, now another angle on that. Say you're like more the little kid. So there's something. There's something in the. If you're needed in surgery, that's okay. You go. The scenario actually played out in my house this week. We've got some people doing some renos for us, and I always don't like this because they might discover some of the things I've done over the years, and so there's some shame involved. But it's really nice if what they discover is somebody else's mistake. And the house was made in 1916, so there's been lots of people doing stuff over the years. And if they open up a wall and they see that something was done horribly wrong, I can have a good laugh with them because, yeah, what kind of moron did that? Man, it's a good thing you guys are here. But every now and then they'll open up something and I'm the moron. And so we're all having a good chuckle and I'm like, that was actually me. So in that situation, when I'm asking them for help, it's much easier to ask for help when it's not my fault than when it's my fault, because there's some shame involved. I'd rather hide it. I'd rather try to fix it myself. I'd rather keep somebody from getting their eyes on it so that they can help. So there's two sides of it. There's the person who's giving the help is more motivated when it's not somebody's fault, and the person asking for help is a little more confident and has less shame when they feel like it's not their fault, if they're a victim somehow. Keep these two dynamics in mind, the shame of the one asking and the inclination of the person helping to be either, yeah, I really want to help, or I don't really want to help, depending on whose fault it was. As we move into this story, because there's going to be two people that approach Jesus here. And one, the problem that they're facing isn't really their fault, and Jesus behaves a certain way. And the other one, the way the story is presented to us, it is that person's fault, and Jesus behaves a certain way. Let's take a look at what he does. We're coming out of the passage that Lydia looked at last week, and if you remember, in that series of verses, what was happening is Jesus was rewriting these dietary laws for the Jews. And the Jews are at the time, they're this group of people chosen by God who, if they live a certain way, if they're faithful a certain way, then God will be faithful to them. They will rise to become a world power, and they will, from that place of power, be able to rule in such a way that the earth is a better place. To them, that's what it means to bless the nations. Sort of, I'll be powerful and be benevolent. And when the Messiah comes, he's going to overthrow our enemies, and going to give us that place of power so that we can be a blessing, but we have to be faithful. And to be faithful means a lot of things, but it means eating a certain way. And then Jesus comes along as the Messiah, casting himself in that mold, getting people's expectations high, but he's taking them in a very different direction. And it gets clearer and clearer a different direction that he's taking them, but one of the clearest places is when he rewrites these food laws. So in the passage last week, it was all about don't eat this, don't eat that, and Jesus says none of that matters. It's what comes outside of a person, from inside of a person that makes them clean or unclean, pure or not pure. So Jesus does something verbally that's really, really threatening, but them, like us, probably aren't as worried about what people say. We get a little bit more worried about what they do. And in this passage, Jesus does something that really backs up what he just says about the dietary laws. He goes to a place that is unclean. Jesus left the place that he was and went to the vicinity of Tyre. Tyre was a place that was renowned in history for being cruel to Jews, enemies of Jews. If you wanted to go to like a really bad place and make a statement, choose Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. Well, usually when Jesus is in a place, it's not a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, did I miss something there? Jesus was in this house. Go back to 24. I feel like I missed something. Yeah, he entered a house. Oh, should be something about a woman in there. Anyway, next verse, I didn't miss it. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. If you were Jewish at the time and you're a part of this story, you're going, we're in Tyre. We shouldn't be in Tyre. She's female. A woman shouldn't come and talk to this respected teacher. She's Greek. She shouldn't be anywhere near him. She has a daughter who has a demon, and the text actually tells us it's not just any old demon, it's an impure demon. As opposed to what, I don't know, but this one in particular is impure. So Mark is going out of his way to be like 4 strikes. This is Jesus making an incredibly bold statement to be in the proximity of this woman. Unclean 4 times over. She begs Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. And then there's this dialogue that is peculiar. Jesus says to her, first, let the children, so he's talking about the Jews, these are the sons of God, the sons and daughters of God as a Jewish nation. Jesus says, first, let the children eat all they want. He told her, for it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. This is the guy we've been singing to. Seems a little harsh. Now, it is sort of harsh to us, but we actually don't know how they would have taken it. The disciples there might have been so in awe and shocked and disgusted that he's actually talking to her that they don't really notice what he says. But there are some ways to soften it a little bit without taking away the edge of Jesus and making him domesticated. Ways that you can understand this that soften it a little bit is when he says first. First is different than you're never going to get anything. First implies that there's something coming for you as well. First implies that there's a plan in place. First I do this, then I do this. The other way to soften it, I think, is if you understand that for much of Jewish history, the pagan, polytheistic, the people that worshipped a whole bunch of different gods and not the one Jewish God, were called dogs by the Jewish people. That doesn't soften it quite yet, but it was a certain kind of dog. It was the dog that roamed. It was the rabid dog in the street, eating whatever can come its way, roaming in packs, just mangy, disgusting, etc., etc. That's not what Jesus is saying here. What kind of dog sits under the table? A puppy, a domestic dog. So there's, in Jesus' clever response, there's 2 indications that, yeah, there is going to be something for you, sister, and you're actually inside the house. You're not as far gone as you may have been led to believe. You actually are in the house. So it's clever, it's witty, it's a little bit peculiar to us, but she picks up on it and isn't intimidated. She says, Lord, the only person in the book of Mark to call Jesus Lord, actually. the only one to get it right until the very end when the centurion says, truly this is the Son of God. So there's honor there. If you're in one of the early Gentile churches and you're still trying to figure out your identity in this whole new Jewish thing that you're a part of, and you hear this story about the Gentile woman being the only one who gets it right so far, it feels pretty good. Like, yeah, she's one of us and she understands. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And we aren't far off if we imagine a twinkle in Jesus' eye at this point. We don't understand his motive entirely. We don't understand why he says what he says, and how this unfolds. But what he says is this. Then he told her, for such a reply, it's like, I'm impressed. That was good. I gave you something really fast, and you were quick enough to bounce back and throw it back at me. You may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed, the demon God. What I want us to see here is this woman that is approaching Jesus, though she's unclean, it's not her fault. Not her fault that she was either born or lives in Tyre, most likely. Not her fault that she's a Greek. Not her fault that she's a woman. And probably not her fault that her daughter has a demon. I mean, we don't always know how these demons attach themselves. Maybe they're watching horror movies when her daughter's little and watching Bride of Chucky or something. And there's a family in the church here who woke up one morning and found their kid watching one of these Chucky movies. That's why I'm saying this, and this is a long time ago. Anyway, now they're worried. It's not her fault. She just is a victim. And when Jesus comes to her, he responds playfully, let's say, almost quizzically, curiously, but it's not her fault. And he gives her what she wants. It's easy for us to understand. We would probably do the same thing. Somebody's not their fault. We're in a position to help. Let's help. The next person that comes, the way that this story is presented to us, it's their fault. Now, it's more symbolic than us actually accusing this person. We don't know enough about their life to know what they did. But the way that Mark describes them, the way he intentionally presents them to us, we're not off when we think that what they're up to, what their condition is their fault. Because Mark presents them as not able to hear, they're deaf, and they're mute. Now that sounds really cruel to say that that's somebody's fault, but just give it a few minutes here and it'll become clear what's happening. This will seem like a wild switch here, but bear with me. Say you wanted to make an idol, and you lived in the ancient world. There's a way that you go about making an idol. You want something to worship. So you fashion it with your hands. You make it out of wood or you make it out of iron or whatever you do, and you have this little ceremony. And what you're trying to do is put life into this thing. You're trying to put the spirit, the life of the deity, into this image that's going to be in your house protecting you that you can worship. So you build the thing, and then you poke its eyes. You kind of smear sometimes on it like plaster. You open its ears and you open its mouth with your hands so that it can see, that it can hear, and that it can speak. And then it can be animated, come to life by the deity. That's how you make an idol. Obviously this is futile for Christians, right? We don't believe that that does much good to worship these things, but this is in the background of what it means to live in that era. That there's this idol creation that goes on, there's a ceremony that happens, eyes, ears, and mouth. But when you make an idol and you start to worship it, and this is a principle that isn't just like an old school biblical one, it's across everything. You become like what you worship, and you always worship something. So if you worship things, you worship money, you become kind of cold and stale and outdated and always wanting more. It shapes who you are. If you worship physical attraction or sexual appeal, it just starts to eat away at you. You eventually are devoured by what you worship, so you have to choose what you worship carefully. This principle is in Psalm 135. Let's read it here. The idols of the nation are silver and gold, made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, nor is there breath in their mouths. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. You become like what you worship. Idols cannot see, they cannot hear, no matter how much we try to do with their eyes and their ears. We're entering into a section of Mark where Jesus is doing miracles that he's never done before. He's starting to focus on eyes and ears and mouths. There's something very intentional that he's doing. He is bringing to life human beings that are so badly broken that they're starting to look more like idols than they are like God. And how do you become an idol? How do you start looking like an idol? You worship the idol. So this deaf and mute man who is presented to Jesus, he looks like an idol. How do you become like an idol? You choose to worship an idol. Who chose to worship the idol? This man did. How do you become like an idol? You choose to. Whose fault is it when you make the choice? It's yours. So we have the woman who just was born in a certain place. And then we have this man who has broken himself. And he comes to Jesus, and it's his own fault. Let's skip to Mark, Warren. We won't worry about the Isaiah passage. We'll pick it up here where this guy is. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk. Okay? He's broken, and he did it to himself. And you know what that's like. It's relatively easy to come to Jesus, to come for prayer, when you are a victim. There's things done to you, but when you've made choices that have made it hard for you to follow God or messed your relationships up, and you know it's your fault, you might not know what's waiting for you when you come to Jesus. They begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Think about how you create an idol. How do you enliven an image? How do you put the spirit of the God in the image? You put your fingers in the ears, you put your fingers in the eyes. Jesus puts his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. Then he looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh, we don't know why he sighed, but do you ever, if you're trying to help somebody and you see what life has done to them, and you see what they've done to themselves, and it just seems like it's such a lot of hurt that's compounded over time, and your spirit just goes, oh, God, and you look to heaven. Maybe this is what's going on. Jesus, with his hands in his ears and in his mouth, which you do when you're bringing something back to life, says, be opened. At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well. They said he even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. He is undoing the damage that people have done to themselves. He is not a father who looks at the kid who has the bike that the kid broke and said, sucks to be you. It's your own damn fault. This is not the Heavenly Father as is represented in Jesus Christ. Those of us who have broken ourselves with our own stupidity, those of us who know better, those of us who, for this is a recent thing that we have broken our lives with our stupid choices and our powerlessness to change, can come to Him and not worry about what He will do. He'll place His hands on you, on those eyes that got plastered over, on the ears that can't hear, on the hollow heart that can't feel the same way it used to or that it should. And He will groan because He refuses to leave any human who comes to Him broken. And He will not turn away from them. He will reach out and He will touch them. He will open their eyes. He will open their ears, even if it's your fault. Yeah, that's the guy we sing to. So let's sing to Him. Turn it over to you, Nipawa. Thanks for joining us. I'll invite the band out and let's stand and sing. So we have the prayer team here. I've made them all promise not to spit in your eyes and in your ears. Think about your life for a second. Think about what maybe you would call the mess you're in. And then imagine like the two headings, it's my own fault, it's not my fault. And probably like most people, if you're honest, the line just kind of blurs and you're just where you are. But I hope one thing was really clear, that it doesn't matter if it's your fault or not your fault, how you think about it, if you think you're a victim or if you think you're the problem. Jesus wants to touch you and make you whole. So if you have been resisting coming to him because you think what you will hear him say is, it's your own fault, you got yourself into this mess, you get yourself out and then we'll talk, that's wrong. It's not who he is. He touches the person whose fault, it's their own fault, and he helps the person who's the victim. And you're probably a little bit of both. So why don't you come to him? Prayer team's waiting for you. These bags are also here for people in our community that need help. They're a great way to show practical love to people. And of course, if you need some help this week too, then help yourself and enjoy. So the prayer team's here. I'll offer them to you, and let me bless you as we go. May you, adopted and blessed by God, go with the power of the Holy Spirit as agents of justice and mercy. May you pay attention to the forgotten, fill the hungry with good things, and by your words and actions, witness to the kingdom of God. May you be steadfast, unmovable, always working enthusiastically for God, because nothing that you do for him is ever wasted. Grace and peace, everyone.